Hey, Nicole, motherhood looks great on you. Just had to say.
Thank you.
Hey, Bonnie, I wanted to ask, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are you ready to go live? And we have to make sure that when you talk, I go mute here because I can even hear the echo already. No, I'm not muted here. I just have the microphone off. If I kill, wait a second. That's me. As soon as I take this off. Let's see if I turn this microphone on. Are we doing okay? No, you're getting feedback. Are you on mute over there? I'm on mute. Because you should be able to hear me through the overhead. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll turn down here. We'll do the best we can. All right. Well. Okay, you guys ready? I'm going to start it. Council, we may have some fine tuning to do as usual. We have a new configuration, so hopefully we'll be able to capture a stronger signal. But let's see for people to be able to hear it online. Let's see how it goes. I'd like to call the July 16th, 2020 regular City Council meeting to order. Will Councilmember Nutting please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please let the record show that all council members are present. Before we move forward and go into correspondence and public comment, I'd just like to remind everybody that the city is still working under the emergency proclamation the city manager issued in March, as well as following the governor's phased-in approach and the Open Public Meeting Act's proclamation. Washington's not out of phase 2, and City Hall continues to remain closed. It's highly encouraged that folks continue to observe social distancing and wear their masks when they're out in public. We've been doing a good job out there. However, there was some activity this weekend on the fishing pier due to crabbing season, and it was apparent that not everybody was able to do their part to flatten the curve. So, it's one thing to be excited. It's one thing we just have to remember. We're not out of the woods with this thing yet. So please, socially distance, be distance, wear your masks, pay attention to it indoors as well. When you're not with people that you live with all the time. So because we want everybody to remain healthy and safe. So with that, thank you. Are there any correspondence or public comment?
Yes, Mayor, we have several written public comment. George Scott wrote in after the deadline last week about the Van Gaskin House. We have Sandy Butler on the Wally's, BL on Wally's Eats program. Cecilia Sandvik on Wally's and the Eats program. Keith Williams, Wally's and Eats. Andrea Sandwalia, no tax money for hate group supporters. James Anderson, Wally's Chowder House and the Eats program. Amanda Cox, remove Wally's from the Eats program. Katie Farrar, please remove Wally's from the Eats program. Samantha Scown, Eats program. Bernice Warren, Marina Parking. Joe Schott, Marina Parking. Bobby Barkley, Marina Parking. Beverly Walker, Marina Parking. Susan White, change in parking system at the Marina. William Schatt, changes to Marina parking system. Marnie Savoris, parking at Des Moines Marina. Betty Robb, Des Moines Marina Parking. L. Michael Price, Marina Parking. Tad Doviak, Councilmember Martinelli's proposed required minimum wage increase. Rick Johnson, Redondo Speed Board sign. And Julian Lowe sent a note about bill payment and other resources for Puget Sound Energy customers. I have posted that information on our website and have shared it amongst social media sites. And we also have a business recycling event coming up on July 22nd at John Knox Presbyterian Church. And again, that flyer is on our website and I have posted that out on social media. We have 3 individuals who would like to do a verbal public comment, and I'm going to go ahead and admit Cynthia Rick McCotton into the meeting at this moment. She is joining right now. And she's here. And she's ready, Mayor.
Please state your name and the city in which you live, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I think you're on mute at this time, though.
I'm sorry, I just got added in. Are you all referring to me?
Cynthia? Yes, we are. And just please state your name and the city in which you live, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, my name is Cynthia Ricks McElpan, and I live in the city of Federal Way.
Thank you.
Thank you all for letting me address you all tonight. I am, again, my name is Cynthia, and I'm with CHI Franciscan Health Youth Violence Prevention Initiative. My office is physically at St. Francis Hospital, and we provide resources to communities to establish grassroots efforts to address youth violence. And since 2014, we have been in the city of Des Moines working with a grassroots effort known as Reach Out Des Moines Coalition. We started the planning process in 2014. The coalition was developed and running in 2015. And by the end of 2015, early 2016, they had started their first project. Our goals are to reduce the chronic absenteeism at Pacific Middle School, as well as to reduce the number of juvenile arrests each year in the city of Des Moines. And so far, in the past 5 years, we've seen a 37% reduction in juvenile arrests. And we've also seen a 24% reduction in the chronic absenteeism at Pacific Middle School. But we're not done yet. Of course, COVID-19 hasn't helped, but we are still providing program and services. So my purpose tonight was to just let you know that Reach Out Des Moines is still very active, that CHI is still committed to facilitating the coalition and providing many grant assistance to address those goals that help students and youth thrive in the city of Des Moines. We are active at Mount Rainier High School, providing services, including mentorships for female youth of color. We are providing before and after care assistance and programming at Pacific Middle School. We're supporting resources and trauma-informed care and helping with building relationships and trust and restorative practices at Des Moines Elementary. We're supporting the Youth Council, and we have partnered with a lot of folks from the city of Des Moines, including Tanya Seabury, our community resource officer. She is totally amazing. The folks from Parks and Rec, they've been amazing. Even Councilmember Nutting, who every year comes out and helps out with National Night Out at Midway Park. Councilmember Harris regularly attends our meetings, and he was attending them even before he became a council member. And then I know that we partnered, and Councilmember Banks have come out to some of our neighborhood and community meetings. And of course, recently, Councilmember Buxton has come and attended some of our virtual meetings. So we're still doing what we're doing. A lot of the programming that we've partnered with the various organizations are happening virtually in light of COVID-19. And the biggest thing that I think we're proud of is connecting the Highline School District folks to Waterview Crossings apartments so that they can have summer meals delivered to them directly, so that there can be counseling and caseworkers and services, so that there's translation services, so that when students walk down Pacific Highway to go to school at either Mount Rainier or Pacific Middle School, they feel protected. We've been addressing a lot of those issues and connecting people to resources. So again, on behalf of the Reach Out Des Moines Coalition, which includes nearby churches like Grace Lutheran and Trinity, the school district, the counselors, many folks from the city, we just want to say thank you. And when we are able to meet in person, we'll actually do a PowerPoint presentation and give you more in-depth information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor David Wilson.
Hello,
Hi, David. Welcome. Please state your name and the city in which you live, and you'll have 3 minutes.
my name is David B. Wilson. I live in the city of Des Moines, 1232 South 235th Place. My comment is about the Blueberry 3 proposed development. File number LUA 2018-0067. This is with regard to the trees, specifically sequoia trees. They were referred to in the conversations earlier as cedar. They are not. I planted those trees 46 years ago. And they were planted all the way along the north boundary of the property. I think it would be a disservice to the neighborhood to remove the trees for the purpose of adding a redundant sidewalk on the north side of the proposed street. The properties adjacent to the street on the north side already have their access. They have no reason to access this street. There's a fence between them and a relatively large difference in elevation for a sidewalk to go through there. The sidewalk proposed on the south side of the street should be adequate for the 5 houses you're putting in and whatever other developments might happen adjacent to there to the south. Removing the trees to fit a one-size-fits-all stipulation from the city that you need sidewalks both sides of a street, I think is not doing the neighborhood a favor. I would ask that you make an exception in this case and keep these trees in the neighborhood. Remember, these trees grow to be 3,000 years old if you leave them. So we got a good start, 46 years. Let's keep going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Samantha, it looks like your microphone is muted. And that may be because you're joining. As soon as you're unmuted, please state your name and the city in which you live, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Samantha Scown, and I live in Des Moines. I just wanted to comment today about the Wally's issue that came up at the last city council meeting. It sounds like it was kind of brushed under the table and just kind of, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to remain neutral. But I do think that that's something that the council should kind of choose a side on, because the council has given thousands of dollars to Wally's already. And this is a pretty large issue in our community. I'm sure all of you are on the Des Moines community group and see, you know, the daily posts about that. So this is kind of an issue that's dividing our community at this time. So I think it would be great if the council could do some sort of resolution saying, you know, I understand that you've given money to them already and that can't be taken back, but maybe if there could be a resolution for the future that, you know, the council will have rules about when they will donate money to organizations in the community, that they will not donate money to organizations that are associated with hate groups or that don't treat their customers fairly. So maybe the council could adopt some sort of resolution about rules for what sort of businesses they choose to associate with and choose to give taxpayer dollars to, instead of just allowing any business that wants to participate. And I understand the money has already been given, but I am assuming there's some kind of advertisements for the EATS program. So maybe Wally's could be removed from those advertisements. I think there's several things that the council could do without actually taking the money back that would be assigned to the community, that, you know, hey, we stand with you on this issue and we understand that Wally's has not done enough in order to apologize for their actions. I understand they put out a statement, but it wasn't really enough and it didn't fully address the issues that the community has. And they are still employing members of their family, of their son's family at the Buckley location. And there's been a lot of posts from the wife of the owner as well online that have not just been about the Black community, but about the gay community, about Muslim people. So it's just kind of a stain on our city right now. So I hope the council can do something about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Mike has been muted to the meeting.
Okay, Mike, when you're muted right now, but when you please unmute and then state your name and the city in which you reside.
Am I on? Can you hear
You
me?
are on.
Good. My name is Mike Nordine, and I currently own a business in the city of Des Moines, and I live in Auburn. I'm the owner of Wally's Restaurants, Wally's Chowder House, and Wally's Drive-In. I've been a part of the community now for over 55 years, all the way from Mar Vista Elementary School through Olympic and Mount Rainier in 1973. I've been a part of the business community here for more than 26 years, and I've actively and generously supported it through donations to the senior programs, Mount Rainier High School, unlimited number of fundraising projects through the years. My restaurants have significantly contributed to the tax base locally and in the state. And more importantly, I employ a large and diverse workforce, a workforce that consists of Hispanic, African American, Asian, Arabic, and members of the LGBTQ communities. Our customers know us, and we appreciate them, every single one of them. We have visitors from all over the country, indeed all over the world, that come to enjoy our unique restaurant, which is set in our unique town. And I consider my staff to be ambassadors for our city and for our state. Anybody that works for me understands the importance of treating our customers and each other kindly and respectfully, and I don't tolerate bigotry of any kind in my restaurants. Nor am I going to stand by and allow those that have an agenda to levy hateful attacks on my restaurant and in turn on my employees. Spreading and creating gossip that is untrue and hurtful is damaging. And Mr. Martinelli, I can't make this any clearer. I find the views and actions of the group, the Proud Boys, reprehensible. My son Ethan no longer works at any of my restaurants, nor is he or anyone in the Proud Boys group or any hate group allowed in my restaurants. I want to make that very clear. And this is a true statement that is long lasting, over 26 years of business in this community. And I guess that's about it. I'd like to thank the mayor and the council for allowing me to speak directly. And I want to remind everybody to remember not to assume you hear everything is true, and never accuse people without knowing all the facts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Did we have something from our assistant police chief? Or is he? I believe that I have a noted statement. Mark, are you out there?
Yes, I'm trying to get my audio or video going here.
Do we have you? Are you up and running?
How's that?
There we go. Okay. I understand you had some statistics that you wanted to share with us.
Actually, I wanted to distribute those, so maybe this is the wrong time to do that.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to put you on the spot. I just had a note.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll take you off and we'll continue to go forward. So this will take us now forward to our administration report. And our city manager, Mr. Michael Mathias.
Thank you, Mayor. You have down on the agenda economic development, but what we did was move that presentation and discussion to our economic development committee. Chair Nutting was kind enough to let us kind of make that switch along with the mayor. Councilmember Buxton is on that committee as well. And we talked about kind of general frameworks for strategies to address COVID and potential resources that may come to the city to help facilitate economic development in the wake of the terrible demise in economic activity that has come as a result of the virus. And we will be updating council at our budget retreat as to what the types of resources and amounts and degrees of resources available to us, and some recommended types of programs within the context of the solvency of the city. The mayor pointed out there have been other cities that have tried to take actions and found themselves underground relative to their finances. And we're going to try and avoid that, and we're going to try and help our local business community. I wanted to just make one announcement. That working with the issues associated with SeaTac Airport has been an ongoing challenge. And last week, the council voted to return to START. And also in that context of time, we received a letter from Steve Edmiston and Sheila Brush, basically informing us they were resigning from the Aviation Advisory Committee, but they made a number of really excellent points, and I appreciated their letter very much and look forward to continuing to work with them as I have for a number of years now. We don't always agree, but we have the same goal in mind, which is to minimize impacts of SeaTac Airport. And the mayor and I had a discussion yesterday with Representative Orwell to that effect in ways that we could participate. But I just did want to make one announcement, and that is that Sheila Brush, working with Congressman Adam Smith's office, had sought to involve a government agency called the Government Accountability Office, who their responsibilities are, generally speaking, to make sure that federal agencies implement the direction of Congress. And shocking as this may be, that doesn't always happen. So Congress passes a law or an intent to do something, and then these guys make sure, my understanding is that those laws are being implemented. And at one point, there were something like 8 national airports under review. And Sheila, through tenacity and her knowledge, worked with Congressman Smith's office to have SeaTac Airport included as one of those national airports that would be reviewed. And the Government Accountability Office was out here last week, they sent a follow-up email saying they'd like to have at least one community representative and someone from city administration to talk with about impacts of the airport related to different subjects. And so what I did was I talked with Sheila, and I've recommended her to be the community representative talking with the GAO, and I will also talk with them. And I just wanted to a way to thank Sheila and Steve for their ongoing commitment to the well-being of this community, and we appreciate that. And Mayor, that's the administrative report tonight.
Thank you. Will the clerk please read the consent calendar?
Yes, Mayor, I am going to read it and read out before that has been moved on to another day.
Yeah, I have a note here that, and I was just going to read it. Council, just to make you aware, staff had to remove the Bards Creek, Kent Des Moines Road culvert project from the agenda tonight. It'll come back before the council sometime in late September, so it will not be read as part of tonight's consent calendar.
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, draft resolution 20-040, 2020 to 2025 hazard mitigation plan. Item 3, Highway 2018-0067, Blueberry Lane 3, modified short subdivision, preliminary approval and concurrence. Item 5, National Park and Recreation Month proclamation. Item 6, collective bargaining agreement, Teamsters Local Number 763. Item 7, Washington State Department of Commerce Shelter Program Grant. And item 8, financial management system software and implementation services. And that concludes the consent calendar, Mayor.
Is there Councilmember Nutting? You're muted.
I was going to make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion was made by Councilmember Nutting. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was Councilmember Bangs, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, does any councilmember wish to remove any items? Councilmember Nutting. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch of hands here, so I'm going to write down the order I saw. I saw Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, and Deputy Mayor Martinelli. Deputy Mayor Mahoney. My apologies.
Congratulations on the promotion.
Let's see, Mahoney. I believe that's it. So I've got Nutting, Bangs, Harris, and Mahoney. Is that correct?
And
Okay.
I just had a question. Don't necessarily want to poll, so
We'll put you, since we're going to go through a conversation, I'll put you after Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Nutting, you have the floor.
I'd like to poll item number 6, please. I have a few questions.
Item number 6. Okay. Then we will go to Councilmember Bangs.
I can either ask a question or pull item 3 related to Blueberry Lane, and it is specifically to the tree issue in question.
Go ahead and ask your question. Do we have the staff? If we have the appropriate staff on the line, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. So based on one of the residents who talked about the trees, the sequoia trees that were proposed to take down, Dan, could you speak to that a little bit? Is that something that, and I looked at everything, but I'm not a planner. So could you speak a little bit to that? Is it a real concern? Will it be a detriment? Is it going to delay anything related to the actual request for Blueberry Lane?
Yes, this is Laura Chico, principal.
Laura.
The trees were the subject of a number of discussions. In order to retain them, we would need to modify the street standards to remove the sidewalk. It was not clear, even if you remove the sidewalk, the curb and gutter still comes very close to those trees. So there was a lot of back and forth discussion over the standard street design, whether, impacts to the root structure. Ultimately, the applicant chose not to pursue the modification to those standards and proceed with the standard street profile.
So is that saying, yes, the trees go?
That is the current proposal, yes.
Okay.
At least the trees that are adjacent to the street tract would be removed.
I'd like to make the suggestion. It seems like there's other people that are going to want to talk about this, and let's deal with it in proper format. Councilmember Bangs, I'm going to note that you pulled item 3.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I next have Councilmember Harris.
I'd like to pull item number 8.
Okay. All right, and then Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Mayor, I'm in alignment with Councilmember Bangs. It was item 3 that I wanted questions or to pull.
Okay. We'll recognize you when that discussion comes up. And Councilmember Buxton?
Yeah, the same with me. I had questions in regard to item number 3. Thank you.
Okay, one moment, please. I don't have those motions in front of me because I'm using my screen. So if I could get, I'm going to need that portion of the agenda. Okay. So given that, our consent agenda or consent calendar would be approval of vouchers, draft resolution 2020-040, the hazard mitigation plan, the National Park and Recreational Month proclamation, and the Washington State Department of Commerce Shelter Program grant. Okay, all those in favor of the consent agenda as just read, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Your hand up until I call your name, please. I see Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Martinelli, and Councilmember Harris. So that portion of the consent or the consent as modified is 7-0. We have a momentary delay while I pick up these other components, but we should be able to move forward. Thank you very much. We'll go back to Councilmember Nutting, who pulled item number 6, and we will start the discussion on item number 6. And we'll start it with you, Councilmember Nutting.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I've got 2 questions. Could you, and I think this is for Dan or Michael, could you summarize the negotiation process and how you arrived at the proposed increase? And question number 2, how did you account for the potential impacts of COVID and the uncertainty of the future economic conditions? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I thank you for the questions, Councilmember Nutting. We've first started meeting with the Teamsters in the fall of 2019. Their contract expired at the end of 2019. That was a 3-year contract that covered the years of 2017, 2018, and 2019. As we sat with the Teamsters, we worked on, a variety of issues for several months. I began to join the conversation in kind of the January, February timeframe, and we're specifically talking about some of the concerns that the Teamsters had that had kind of spanned kind of the last 2 contract cycles. And so as we sat down at the table, it really kind of became a cooperative bargaining discussion with the Teamsters. to kind of address some of their concerns with wages in particular. And we began to talk about comparable cities and what is a comparable market as an employer. Who are my competitors that are going to take our employees away? And so we worked back and forth with the Teamsters to kind of narrow down what is a comparable city. And there's a lot of factors that we were looking at as we decided what is a comparable city. We finally agreed on 8 cities that we collectively felt were reasonably competitive as far as size and income streams and things like that. And we were making some good progress, and then COVID happened. We ended up being quarantined for a while, and we weren't able to meet for probably 2 months there. And then as we kind of got back on our feet a little bit, and we were able to get some of the technology up and running, we began to meet with them over Zoom and so we could complete the negotiations here over the last 6 to 8 weeks. One of the things that when we first met with them after the COVID impact is I remember coming into the room and saying, wow, have things changed? Because literally where we were going with the discussions, we had to deal with the impacts that are certainly in front of us relative to COVID. So we talked about that for a meeting and a half, just how we would approach the impacts of that. And so I'll come back to what we ended up doing there. What we decided to do was to continue and complete our discussions on comparable cities and comparable job descriptions within those cities. And so we completed that task. So we were looking at like job to like job and within comparable cities. And that gave us the ability to figure out what is the average compensation for a particular job with our competitors. And from there, we were able to start looking at where our Teamster employees were at relative to the average in the market. And so we ended up where we ended up when we passed the 2020 budget, we had factored in and assumed that we would be at least equal with the Teamsters with what the other employees received in 2020. So we had cost of living adjustments factored into the budget that totaled 3% for 2020 and some other adjustments of 1.35%. So the total adjustment in our budget was 4.35%. And that's equivalent to what other staff and employees had received. And so as we adjusted the employee wages to the average of the market, we ended up on average at about 98% of the average. So technically, we're still below average by just 0.2%, where we ended up with our wages. And that was after we were able to make a market adjustment of an additional 1.15%. So altogether added up, it's about 5.5%. And there's some reasons why we had to do that in this particular contract. And I want to go back to the contract that we entered with the Teamsters for 2017 through 2019. If you'll remember, we were still on the heels of coming out of potential bankruptcy at that time. We still were struggling. Things were getting better, but we had tightened the screws down on our employment contracts so tightly that what happened with that almost immediately after that contract was signed, the labor market took off, the economy took off, and the Teamsters were left behind in average wages. And so we really were trying to deal in this particular contract with kind of 2 contract cycles to get them up to at least close to the average of compensation of our competitors. So that's the process that we went through to get to where we're at with the wages. As we sat down at our first meeting after COVID, I told the Teamsters, let's continue this process and figure if we can figure out what that average wage is, assuming that we had approved this contract January 1st, prior to COVID. And that's where we ended up. And the point that I made also is that the real struggle is going to be, how do we deal with the future years, 2021 and 2022? So this is a 3-year contract. And, you know, with contracts, everybody wants certainty. They want to try to fold in certainty. Well, normally we've been able to have a pretty good idea of what the future holds, and we could provide some of that certainty. But we don't have that right now. We're not in a position where we can give that certainty. We don't know what 2021 is going to look like. And so once we got to where we knew what the competitive wages were going to be for 2020, the real discussions began, which is how are we going to share the risk? And so I want to say off the top, this was a real cooperative bargaining. We worked well with the Teamsters in hearing, and they participated in helping to solve this question of how are we going to share risk of the future. So as we talked about what COLAs might look like in 2021 and 2022, where we ended up with in the contract is we moved our target CPI, which is a consumer price index. Normally we set COLAs based on the June CPI. We were able to propose that for the next 2 years that we move that CPI and base COLAs on the October consumer price index, which is issued in the first week in November. And the reason that's important is right now, we still don't know what the impacts of the COVID and the unemployment and the economy are going to be in 2021. But over the next several months, that'll become clearer and clearer as we get closer to the next cycle. So we agreed to use that consumer price index. And we also agreed to share the risk of COLA. So they agreed to accept 100% of that CPI. And, you know, normally we would want to put a floor and a ceiling that, you know, typically we would negotiate the range, a minimum and a maximum. Well, depending on who you talk to, that CPI could be positive, but it very well could be negative. It very well could be that the CPI is negative as we get to the end of the year. So part of the negotiation strategy of using a market-based approach to setting wages is that when the market goes up, the wages go up. When the market goes down, we've got to respond to that as a business and deal with wages. Otherwise, we're paying more than what's in the market. So that's how we negotiated to share the risk in the future, is depending on what happens in the market, that's what we'll do, with the goal of being competitive with wages with our competitors. And, you know, this is going to be important for us over the next couple of years, over the next decade, because in this region, while unemployment is certainly a problem in our state and around the country, we have 2 multi-billion-dollar transportation projects being constructed right in our backyard in the next 10 years. So we have the Sound Transit extension down to Federal Way, which is under construction now. And we have the SR 509 extension as well as the 167 extension. So the market for labor is going to be very challenging for us in the next decade. So we need to stay competitive. Otherwise, our talented staff that we've trained for a long time will find it lucrative to go work somewhere else. And we can't afford that. So those are some of the things that went into the negotiation and how we're addressing impacts of COVID and the uncertain times coming in the future.
Councilmember Nutting, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate the response, and I really appreciate the intent behind the negotiations. Been here for 6 years, and tightening the belt was always what we were trying to do. And I believe you and your team negotiated the best contract possible there, and with shared risk. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment? I see Councilmember Harris.
So I seem to recall when we had the executive session covering this, that that there was going to be another executive session to sort of summarize the negotiation before it was brought to council for a vote. Did I mishear that, or was this put on the consent agenda just because of COVID-19, or what?
No, it was put on the consent agenda because we negotiated the contract within the parameters that the council gave us at that executive session. So there was no need to go back to executive session.
Wow. Okay, I guess I would have been happier to be able to have a private discussion about this before being asked to vote up or down. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this topic? City Manager Matthias. You're muted, Michael. You had it and you lost it. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, thank you. So I think the questions by Councilmember Nutting are right on target. And, as this process went forward, I have to compliment Dan and AJ for just a phenomenal effort of being patient, addressing everything that came up, finding a way to share risk. I wanted, last time that happened outside of General Motors right before they're going to collapse, right? I mean, they did a phenomenal job. I really respect the leadership of the Teamsters and the communication that occurred within their collective bargaining unit and within ourselves. And so I think this is basically amazing and just a great job. And I also want to compliment at the same time, previously we'd had negotiations with the Police Guild, and those came out very positively as well. And it's just, once again, interest-based bargaining. We take into consideration the needs of the other party in the best way that you can. And in the end, that develops respect. And respect is the basis of agreements and of all the things we do at work. So I just can't thank Dan and AJ and Cabot, our consultant who helps us with this, enough. Thank you.
Councilmember Banks.
So I want to sort of take us back, and there were, I think, a couple of us on council 5 years ago when I first started, where we had some pretty contentious negotiations going on. And I would say we've come a long way since that time. And I appreciate the level of cooperation and respect by not only our staff, but by our unions, because in the past it wasn't always that way. I think what you develop when it comes to your workers is that if you have a sense of respect and a sense of fairness in moving forward and allowing our city manager and staff to do the job we appointed them to do, or hired them to do rather, then what you have is going forward in the future, less angst, even though we know the economy is uncertain. We know that. And I appreciate the fact that you came to consensus with the Teamsters and soon the other union contracts, knowing that our word is essentially bond unless something happens in the economy that turns it to something that's not necessarily positive for anyone really, but you have no control over that. So I want to thank staff, and I want to thank our guilds, and I want to thank our unions. So great job, guys.
Okay, and then I saw Councilmember Nutting's hand go up. Councilmember Nutting, I'll remind you, this is your second time.
I move to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Des Moines and the Teamsters Local 763 effective January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2022, and to authorize the city manager to execute and sign a clean copy of this agreement substantially in the form as attached.
Second.
I heard Councilmember Bangs on the second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and hold it up until I call your name. Okay, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Martinelli, and Councilmember Harris. This motion passes 7-0. Okay, Council, that takes us now to item number 3, having to do with the Blueberry Lane modified short subdivision. And Councilmember Bangs, you started that, so I'll give the floor back to you first.
Okay, thank you. And Laura, thank you very much for answering those questions. If in summary, just for the public's sake, could we sort of walk through the issues with the trees? And then you said, from what I understand, there were a certain amount that had to be removed. Does that mean that there's a certain amount that doesn't have to be removed? I don't know how many there are in total.
And I'm not sure how far beyond the end of that street tract that those trees extend. The ones that are immediately adjacent to the tract are currently proposed to be removed, though.
Do we know how many that number is, or no?
I can look that up, but I don't have that handy now.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, I see Councilmember Buxton and then Councilmember Harris.
Sorry for the late question. I did a quick review of that item, and I thought it was more having to do with the shape of the lot than it had to do with trees. So Laura, it sounded like that the definitive decision had to do with the developer deciding not to move forward with any kind of change, or was it just prohibitive? Could you, because it almost doesn't sound like maybe it's up to us to make the decision. It was up to the developer.
Well, at this point, the developer proposed, what they proposed to move forward with is meeting the city's code. To do other, at least in terms of the street standards, would be a modification, would require additional noticing, would require an arborist to certify, these are going to be in the right of way, to certify that even if we remove the sidewalk, does the curb and gutter coming so close to those trees impact the stability and kind of the long-term maintenance requirements that would be associated with it?
So are we saying that even if we said, hey, let's keep the trees, what it does is it delays his development significantly because he has to conduct some studies, or he or she, I'm making an assumption.
Yeah, there would be additional studies needed, and then there would be additional noticing needed. Every time you modify something for a subdivision, you need to specifically notice what is proposed to be modified. And then also they'd be required to propose mitigation measures for anything they're modifying. So it's uncertain whether just retention of the trees would satisfy that requirement.
Can I add to what Laura is saying just a little bit to clarify? So when we do development review, essentially we review to the code, and we don't have a lot of authority outside what's adopted in the code to require different features of the development. While we kind of hate to see trees be removed, when a developer comes to us and proposes something that meets the city code, we don't really have a lot of authority to not approve that. And our code doesn't have really requirements for tree retention in this particular case, and the street meets our code, so we have very little basis to not approve the development.
So let me clarify. I am not proposing that we vote to change anything. I was simply asking for clarification on those trees. So don't misconstrue that I'm asking for a vote to change something. I just want to make that really clear.
That's fair. And to let everybody know, I've seen a lot of hands pop up. So we will now be going. I've got Councilmember Harris, then I have Deputy Mayor Mahoney, I have Councilmember, I saw Councilmember Bangs again. And then I have Councilmember Nutting. Councilmember Bangs, it doesn't look like I must have missed the motion. So I'm going to Councilmember Harris for his first time, Deputy Mayor Mahoney for his first time, and Councilmember Nutting his first time on this topic.
Hi, Laura. So we have this tree replanting thing. I think it's in section 18 of the code, and I'll apologize. My vision is very poor, but I didn't see anything about mentioning the trees in this, in the packet. So either I missed it or, so what is it, at what point does cutting down the trees become a requirement that it would show up in a resolution like this? In other words, why isn't that in the packet for me to go, wow, we're cutting down some trees?
So as you're reviewing a subdivision, there is a requirement to retain significant trees to the extent possible. But if there are things like roadways, utilities, those are not areas where an applicant is required to retain. We look at the different lots, and if there are areas on those lots outside of what would be the developable area, what can they retain? But there is a maximum that we can require them to state. So these are not something that, as Susan said, we would have been had required them to retain, and thus not something that has a replacement ratio of some sort.
Okay, so if it's basically not a code requirement, it doesn't show up in this description, is the short answer.
Correct. So there's no deviation from the code in that end.
And they have no requirement to replace or augment the arbor, the number of trees in that area.
For these specific trees, no.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there anything that the city council can do to have some sort of conditional approval that might incorporate saving the trees and having the development continue?
I guess I can jump into that one. In order for the council to change or add something, I guess, to the approval, there'd have to be a code basis for that, because this is a quasi-judicial type of action and not a policy issue. So if we don't have a code requirement for it, we wouldn't really have a basis for that.
Thank you.
Councilman, I'm sorry. I've got Councilmember Nutting, and then I see Councilmember Harris for a second time.
Well, my only question is, are these trees in the public right of way? Is that what I understood?
They will be once the plat is recorded, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Harris, you have your second time.
So I would just say that, when something unfortunate like this happens, perhaps it's an opportunity to revisit the city code for next time. Thank you.
I have a quick question here. So it sounds like sequoias are not considered trees of significance under these circumstances. Is that correct?
They are defined as trees of significance based on the size of the trees, but the retention requirements, given that this is an odd shaped lot, it's a T shape, and that is really their only frontage and their only place that they can place an access. So there's really not a lot of other options to redesign to try to avoid them. So there are provisions for not requiring within, areas for transportation, for surface water, those types of situations.
And this is not a critical area, correct?
Correct.
So, so these are 45 years old, and I know in the life of a sequoia, it sounds like a baby because they can live 3,000 years. How big are they? Do we know?
There would have been a tree survey at the time with the diameters. I don't have that handy now.
Well, 45 years is still a pretty long time for even a tree that can live 3,000 years. Depending upon the height, I don't know. I think at a very minimum, it might be worth it. I think the staff's been very clear in that we have no provision with which to prevent this. But it would be an act of good faith on the part of the developer if we could ask them to consider planting some sequoias in another location where it would not, because obviously, well, not obviously, it doesn't sound like these can be saved. So if these can't be saved, it would be a gesture on behalf of the developer with the city to plant other sequoias in another location that wouldn't interfere with the development. And I think it's a reasonable ask. There's nothing we can do to make them do it. It's just an ask. I don't know how well this is being received. I see a hand by City Manager Matthias and by, I'm not sure, possibly Dan Brewer.
Yeah, I just want to say, that it's always difficult, and it's an ongoing issue with municipalities when code requirements conflict with environmental or natural or arbor type issues, and that's unfortunate. But one thing we've not been able to do with the council as a result of the whole process with COVID that we hope to get to soon is that an urban canopy master plan was commissioned by the port to pay for Forterra to do an analysis of our urban canopy and how to generate the healthiest tree canopy possible in the city. And so I would hope that this situation, maybe there's a way that sequoias could be placed in an appropriate spot. They could grow 3,000 years. I know Mahoney will still be on the council, but just to say that maybe there's some ways we could address this. And I think that urban canopy, and we have the master plan, we want to hand it out to you, give it to you, walk through it. We just haven't had the opportunity with council, the way it's been, the dynamic of COVID. But I think that if we could utilize that as the basis to maybe make some reforms to our tree code, which is always complicated and contentious. I know Denise will probably bop me in the head, but the thing is, maybe we can coordinate an approach that has environmental value around urban canopy, maximizing that, and then addressing some of these issues that come up. Maybe there's a way to do that. And I might also add, due to Dan's skill, we are potentially going to receive a significant amount of money from Sound Transit relative to the placement of the light rail regarding trees and tree replacement and all of that. So just a thought. I mean, I think that I totally appreciate what council is wrestling with. And I don't know there's a solution at this moment, but I think there could be a solution in the long term that would work.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, I see Councilmember Buxton. This would be your second time to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, City Manager Mathias. I appreciate your compassionate response here to our concerns. And in this situation, having to, this is the tension between two of my greatest core values, green and economic development in our community. And one of the last things I'd ever want to do is create a roadblock in front of somebody who's developing and providing housing in our community. But also, I just happen to be a tree lover. So this information that we received is a little bit too late to really move forward without creating a significant roadblock or really inappropriate roadblock for a developer who's come this far. So I agree with the city manager and maybe putting it on, remanding the subject to our environment committee and moving forward from there to do something that maybe in the future would help in a situation like this. And so even though it's a little bit tension filled for me, I'm going to go ahead and vote to pass this and recognizing I don't think there's too much that we can do in this instance, but maybe in the future. Thank you.
Councilmember Bangs.
Laura, just real quick, how is lot 5 accessed? Because I'm looking at the map and it's hard to tell.
So lot 5 is accessed by an easement across lot 4. So that is one of the 2 modifications that they've requested, so that it's by easement versus in a tract, so that lot 4 doesn't drop below the lot width, which is not something that they can modify.
Okay, that's the yellow line I'm looking at is the easement.
That may be. I have a black and white copy.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this point, I don't see anybody else wishing to speak. The motion is to concur with, to concur with city staff, the preliminary approval of the Blueberry Lane 3 modified short subdivision, city file number LUA 2018-0067. Before I ask for someone to make that motion in a second, the one point of clarification, it's not only that there, in this particular circumstance, that there's no remedy. My understanding, based on Susan Cesar's comments, is that, and I look to our council, it would be illegal to block it at this time. Is that correct?
Well, the question before the council is, our city staff made a determination of approval based on the code. And the question is, does the council concur with that decision? And if they don't, we would need a basis for that. So
there's no base. We've already heard that there's no basis in code.
Well, yeah, I mean, the council would need to provide a basis. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a valid decision. So
okay.
It wouldn't be something defendable. Let me say it that way. It wouldn't be a defendable denial or non-concurrence unless there was a valid basis.
I understand. And so with that, I'll ask, does anybody want to make the motion as I've just read it?
So moved, Mayor.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Bangs, seconded by Councilmember Nutting. All those in favor, please raise your hand and let me count until I call your name. Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and Councilmember Bangs. Those opposed? I have Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Martinelli. Motion passes 5-2. Okay. This takes us now to item 8. The financial management system software and implementation services. That was pulled, I believe, by Councilmember Harris. So at this point, Councilmember Harris, you have the floor.
Who is taking questions on this? I would, Beth Ann or?
That would be me. Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. So, yeah, this will be real quick. I believe you and I spoke before about, having project-based accounting, and I looked at the product brochures and so on. I was hoping that there might be, I've seen in other municipal accounting systems that there might be some opportunity for more, making it easier to get public reports. I'm constantly getting asked for information about, are you familiar with ClearGov and that sort of thing?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay. Are there any opportunities for that kind of a, I'm not looking for the Starship Enterprise, but I'll get questions literally every week about, how much revenue for the marina parking, for example, and people want an easier way to access that information. So I was hoping the new system might be able to afford that kind of thing. Not immediately, but, eventually.
They do have a transparency tool that they can use with Munis. That is something that we can look at after we get the core system in place with the integration.
Okay, so that's an add-on, right?
Yes, and it's not part of the bid that we have before us.
Okay, but they do make, they have a turnkey tool that we could look into later.
Right.
Groovy, that's all.
Or there's other companies that will interface with Munis to provide that transparency piece. So when we get there, we can look at what would be the best tool.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
City Manager Mathias.
Thank you. I just want to make mention that, we have not had an integrated financial management system. The whole time I've been here, and I don't think there was one before I got here. And it's been difficult with payroll. It's been difficult with the interface with human resources, position control, reports issued by the system, but most importantly, for Beth Ann and her staff not to be doing manual accounting when we could have, an automated system. So Beth Ann, in addition to everything else she's had to deal with relative to COVID, relative to the normal functions of the finance department, relative to the fact that half at least of her staff are not in the office on a daily basis because they're telecommuting, all of that, she went through this, and we discussed it, Dan, myself, especially, and Beth Ann and Sean talked about the process. And so I appreciate council's statements and potential support, but this is a milestone for our city. Thank you.
I can honestly say, City Manager Mathias, that this has been a topic for over the decade that I've been here. This is very old software. Beth Ann, you are a hero for finding a way to use it. So with that, I will make the motion to approve Tyler Technologies license and service agreement for the Munis ERP software application and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement substantially in the form as attached. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
It was me.
It sounded like Councilmember Nutting to me.
No, it was me.
I'm going to give the second to Councilmember Buxton Nutting Banks Mahoney. But no, I think for the record, I have to, I will say, I did hear Councilmember Nutting because your voice was the loudest. Do you want to yield to Councilmember Buxton? That's up to you.
I absolutely will.
Okay, so the second is by Councilmember Buxton. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye, and hold it up till I call your name.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Nutting, and Councilmember Harris. So I have 7-0 on that. And this completes the agenda portion of things. At this time, I will read the summary of the National Park and Recreation Month proclamation into the record. Now, therefore, the Des Moines City Council hereby proclaims July as Parks and Recreation Month and encourages all our cities to join in this special observance. Council staff has amended the agenda. I'm sorry, that ends that proclamation. So at this, tonight we have an amended agenda. We have removed the pay and display parking system for the Marina Beach Park. Staff hopes to bring that back to the council sometime in late September. Personally, I think that solution needs to be discussed a bit further. So I recommend that before this comes back to the council, that it runs by the Municipal Facilities Committee. So I'm gonna suggest that we do that. Do I have concurrence?
You have concurrence.
I accept that as the chair of the committee.
Okay.
We agree.
Okay, and I've seen
Agreed.
Anybody against? Okay, so this has been remanded to municipal facilities, and we will get this back later in the year. So that takes us forward to board and committee reports. And tonight we start with Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quick comment on the Teamsters. The Teamsters that we brought up this evening. Snowmageddon. I thought we approved as a council a lunch for these guys, and I haven't heard a report back on if we actually got a lunch for them. And if we have not done that, I strongly suggest that we make that happen. I know they still show up to the office, even though all of us are not at City Hall. But if that's the case, I'd like to make that happen for those guys, because we did approve it as a council about 1.5 years ago or so.
I believe the reason that that's relevant, Councilmember Nutting, is that when we approve that, we don't have the ability to spend the budget that way, but I believe the Hearts and Minds Fund, which is council dollars for a variety of recognition, was how that was funded, and that was approved by the body. I don't know if the opportunity ever occurred. I also know that it's a bit of a challenge right now. I'll see if City Manager Matthias can shed light on that for us.
Well, I'm not quite sure how it's going to play relative to COVID, but I did want to thank Councilmember Nutting for his impeccable timing in suggesting this in 80-degree weather. And we'll try to find a way, especially working with Dan and Beth Ann and Bonnie, how we can do that. And thank you for mentioning it.
I appreciate it, and if if we can brief the council if it happens. I know it's difficult times, so thank you very much. I'd like to report on the committees tonight. Municipal Facilities Committee met this afternoon. We talked about the draft CIP. Obviously, with the COVID, things have been put on hold to help balance everything. Des Moines Memorial Flag Triangle, court security, police security improvements, and City Hall heat pumps. And court security possibly because of revised operations. Projects under completion or completed or under construction. City Kitty Park, we're just doing punch list items. There's several other that are complete. And then Sanju is complete, but we're talking about parking improvements. There was talk about the grants at Midway Park to expand the parking, several parcels. Was done by RCO funding, and that's important because that and conservation futures, no structures were allowed, and that plays into the update on the Midway Park. So we talked about conceptual discussion about the possibility of a community center up there, but because of our grant funding, the no structures are allowed. And then we also talked about the dive park at Redondo. There were several issues at the October meeting with the tribes and DNR, and then the next meeting was set for March. The tribes were warming up to the idea, and DNR was as well. That meeting was canceled due to COVID, and no meetings will be held until we enter phase 3 as a state here, or I'm sorry, as a county. Then the Economic Development Committee met, and we had a COVID update, and City Manager Matthias spoke to that already in his report. Basically, all we discussed is the CARES Act, the EATS Act, how we're going to be able to use the CARES Act, and we'll discuss more of that at our budget retreat on August 6th. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Okay. First of all, I want you to know how thrilled I am for Beth Ann and the staff. It may not have sounded like it, but I've installed about 1,000 of these systems. I'm scared to remember, and it's like going from using hand tools to a power saw. Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled for you guys. I saw a bunch of people out the day that crabbing started, and nobody's more excited about it than I am, but I would like the public to understand that COVID-19 is not exactly going all that great here in Des Moines. And my sense is that this is going to be going on for like a while, and we got to stop thinking of this as like 1 month at a time. I don't know what the council can do about it, but yeah, I think people are just sort of, just hung over on it. But we've got another 6 months, so whatever we can do to encourage that would be really good. So I've been in a number of transportation meetings, at my first transportation meeting, I talked about how Metro is expecting like something like 30–35% cuts, and a lot of that is in the South End, and we have those essential workers, and I don't know what we can do about it, but I sure would like to see us get, not get quite as many cuts. Also, PSRC had a transportation meeting with a very good presentation on passenger ferries, and the one sentence takeaway was passengers absolutely love it, but expect that it will cost a lot more than you think. I have had a couple of conversations with Maria Cantwell and her office because the federal administration has recently changed NEPA rules, making it much tougher for us to fight back on the upcoming SAMP, and we need all the help we can get in getting a full EIS. Let's see, oh yeah, Reach Out Des Moines, their whole program was renewed for another 3 years, and I could not be more happy. I look at Midway Park now and all the new development, and man, it's just amazing to me the turnaround in that area. Thank you to everybody who's, but it all started with, just community, the residents, and some very small steps. And my final little rhetorical flourish is that, gee, I wish there weren't so many items on the consent agenda. It's just, these are all really material items that deserve a much further hearing, and I wish that they could come before us just in some way that allowed for us to get the information more quickly, especially that Blueberry Lane thing. I wish to God that there was a way that I could have learned about that tree issue faster than 10 minutes before the meeting. And that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I would like to report first on the farmers market. It is doing fabulously, especially considering our circumstances. The market is unable to allow crafting vendors, but this last weekend, they welcomed 1,069 visitors, and their sales are right up with last year. So I think it's possibly a combination. People want a lovely place to get out, and we're welcoming a lot of very happy visitors down at the market on Saturday mornings. This morning, I attended the Growth Management Policy Board of PSRC, and I think the most notable takeaway is the interesting conversation this time with regard to growth strategies in the region. PSRC is traditionally a manager of federal funds out into our communities, and basically our growth strategies all revolve around transportation. There was so much talk about revisiting our paradigms about transportation and about growth strategies revolving around transportation, all because of COVID and how we are doing work now. And so it was kind of it was comments from all over the region. So I wouldn't be surprised if we revisit our ideas about transportation and funding for economic growth over the next couple of years. Also, I just wanted to say I was incredibly impressed with Reach Out Des Moines. I am very thankful for an organization like that in our community. And I also wanted to thank our staff for doing such a fabulous job in that labor negotiation. Very impressed. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple brief remarks. I want to thank those in the city who are continuing to wear masks and socially distance. It's incredibly important. I think more people need to do it, but for those who are, thank you. It makes a big difference. I also want to give a huge thank you to Steve Edmondson and Sheila Bruss for the many hours and years that they spent on behalf of our city and the community in the Aviation Advisory Committee. They played a big role, and they, it's unfortunate that it led to their resignation, but I think that the reasonings they gave do make sense, and I encourage everyone to read that letter, and I hope that the city takes those words to heart. Sounds like the city manager is, based on his comments earlier, and I think that's good. And earlier, I just want to make a quick comment on the Teamsters negotiation. The motion came a little quicker than I was expecting. I just wanted to make a brief comment. I did do quite a bit of looking into it, and I think that it was well negotiated. I think it's a good, fair contract. I have some people express concerns with me based on the timing of it, but I do think it was a well negotiated and fair deal, and that's why I voted in favor of it. And that's my comment for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Banks.
Thank you, Mayor. One committee meeting besides municipal facilities. I'm liaison for the Arts Commission, and we met around the SR3 fence art, and we had several applicants. Not sure if it was 9 or 10, might have been, 9 or 10. Anyway, we whittled it down to 4, and at this particular point in time, there were additional questions that were provided the artists, and they're submitting those answers as we speak. we have a tight deadline. Hopefully we'll be able to find or decide on the one artist that we want. And of course, SR3 is firmly involved in this. And so there's a July 27th deadline to get this artwork into the printer. And so far we've seen some really wonderful artwork. So hopefully we'll be able to provide a presentation as time goes on with the final decision. And then we also discussed the Midway Park artwork on the wall there at the new court. And I thought moving forward, if we determine to get someone who is going to sort of oversee that artwork, that we make sure we incorporate at least some of the children in the schools, like we did for the backboards on the basketball court. So I think that was well received, Susan. I'm not sure, we'll move forward with that, but that concludes my report this time.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the first thing I have to talk about is this Saturday at 6 p.m. We're going to have a virtual parade as an effort to build community. I highly encourage you all to watch it. I eagerly seek your feedback. There was over 200 and some video clips we put together that I think was going to show a Des Moines that you never even knew existed. And those of you who have been around a long time, I think will get that same realization. Now, it's going to be on several things. It's going to be tied to the Waterland blog and of course, Destination Des Moines and their Facebook pages and Facebook Live. We get a resolution issue fixed. It'll be on Channel 21 as well. We should know that by tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to it, but these are the times of concerted efforts. I want to wholeheartedly thank Destination Des Moines, Rotary, and in particular, a parade committee we have that spends hours doing this and encouraging people to submit. And if we'd have had a real parade, the work there is enormous as well. We hope to get back to next year. So I hope you enjoy the show, but it's going to be 6 p.m. It'll be on one of those avenues. And if you missed it, you will definitely have a link to watch it at your leisure. Now, have a barbecue and make some time because it's about 2 hours long, as a typical parade would be. And there's some great surprises. Secondly, I've seen a couple comments in social media, and I'm very concerned about the misinformation. One in particular is the way Des Moines conducts its financial situation. The truth is we are one of the ones that run it the best. Recently in the news, one city north of us had a situation where they're looking at a $3 million deficit. And a lot of times it's sexy to throw money at problems and look good. But if you can't sustain it or you have to renege it, it does no good. We've collectively and creatively worked hard to find ways to serve our community in this difficult time, facing what's going to be a general fund hit that we haven't yet assessed. And Michael and Beth Ann and the rest of your staff, I want to say thank you, because we're going to come out of this in a position where we can do these great projects, where we can move the city forward, and we're going to do them for less money than otherwise had we not been prudent. The last one is, Councilmember Harris, I just have to caution you and call out something. So just your comments just a little bit ago, you had reached out to Maria Cantwell, et cetera, and there's been a couple other incidents. I need to remind you, well, you have the best intent, that Council Rule 5C needs to be adhered to. And that would be that you ask and work with the rest of us so we know what you're doing, so we can work in concerted effort. There may be mutual or efforts going on in similar situations at different channels, and you're not familiar with those. So I ask you for that you adhere, because we're stronger together when we work on problems than if we go rogue. Thank you.
Thank you. My report is minimal tonight. There was a meeting of the Environment Committee, of which I've been selected to chair. And essentially that was on July 9th. We had a selection of chair, myself, vice chair, Councilmember Bangs. We did an approval of our work plan. Like most committees, we are, like all committees, we are running on an abbreviated schedule, doing the best we can to complete as much as we can this year. I think the staff is doing an outstanding, is almost an understatement, job at making sure that the city stays on the rails and we get things as far forward as we can. Things are a challenge. We are under the modified version of the OPMA. I don't know how long that will last. And frankly, I am cautiously optimistic as to when it will end, because the numbers are going in a different direction and it's just concerning. So again, I echo many of my colleagues and many of the other electeds that are out there. Please be socially distant. Please be smart. Please wear your mask. I really, especially here in Des Moines, we have a lot of people that are in the higher area of risk, and we need to take care of everybody as a community. So please do that. Before I go to closing, I see Councilmember Bangs has a question for a statement.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone viewing or listening that there are signs up at Redondo and as well as the marina about social distancing. And I know it's important to reiterate that, but people have to be responsible. And I will say I've walked the marina almost every day and I've seen almost everyone wearing a mask. So please, to emphasize what Councilmember Harris said, wear your masks. You know, that won't kill you. Something else will though. Thank you.
Okay, with that concludes my remarks, and that takes us to the end of our meeting. Our next meeting will be our budget retreat on August 6th. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion was made by Councilmember Nutting. Hand goes up, seconded by Councilmember Bangs. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I'm going to let the record show all 7 council members raised their hand. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. We are adjourned.